In One Piece chapter 1117, Sword prepares for war, Zoro faces Nujuro, and Dr. Vegapunk has a special message for everyone with a D initial. The cover page features the continuation of Yamato's pilgrimage. Neko Mamushi is happily given a hug, while Hyogoro smiles at them both. Over on the pirate island Hachinosu, one guy was freaking out over the implications of Dr. Vegapunk's message like we have for weeks. If he's telling the truth, there might actually be plenty of treasure at the bottom of the ocean. But another pirate called a guy dumb for thinking that, since it's not like the whole world was full of golden cities. Which just makes me believe the opposite even more. Especially since that's exactly what Chandora was before the Void Century, a city of gold. Regardless, even if there is treasure down there, we're talking about depths of 200 meters. That's troublesome enough on its own, but the danger of sea beasts makes things even worse. And speaking of sea beasts, we actually see a sea lion here. This is only the second time we've seen this species in the entire series. And although they're a different thing, maybe Vegapunk's announcements have made me a bit paranoid, but I can't help but wonder if we'll end up with an Attack on Titan level reveal for the Sea Kings one day. They're connected to the ancient weapon Poseidon, which has come up during this broadcast. They were also supposed to assist the Noah for some unknown task related to Joyboy during the Void Century. With this ancient flood of the world in mind, Joyboy may have wanted to save as many people as he could, but failed. One of the pirates mentioned the possibility of submarines, but those things aren't cheap. Then they just started drooling over the idea of meeting mermaids. After that, we had the Saruyama Alliance on the Grand Line. They were all very impressed by Dr. Vegapunk's story, which told tales of a time before Noland. Captain Cricket found it to be rather romantic, and so he wondered if his pals were up for a sea diving adventure. Asira and Shoujo were eager and overjoyed, and it looks like Shoujo has traded his old hat for one like Luffy's. As longtime admirers of Noland the Liar, after confirming the existence of the Golden City, this has to feel like a dream come true all over again. It's like finding out that your favorite series has an exciting sequel on the way. One that might be even better than the original. Then we have the GS Marine General Hospital. They were listening to the broadcast too, and Helmeppo figured that all of this Pirate King talk must be about the One Piece. Hibari began thinking about the news to herself. They were also rounding Kobe's hospital bed. The young hero felt faint and planned on writing everything down later on. He was struggling to keep up with the doctor's words and doctor's orders. He also had plenty of other stuff on his mind. Rear Admiral Kujaku approached them all after going to see their leader. His recovery was progressing smoothly, but for the moment, he wanted to be left alone. Kobe turned to Rear Admiral Prince and mentioned how things were really ramping up lately. So yeah, even Kobe knows that we are entering the endgame here. Prince agreed and was pretty sure that when they eventually get answers to their questions, they will be difficult to accept, which is very foreboding. Suru's granddaughter believed that it was time for them to step up and make things happen. After all, they are the most flexible force in the Navy. Meanwhile, their leader X-Drake stoically listened to the broadcast by his lonesome. As somewhere in the New World, one of the coolest Marines contacted Tashigi while riding his Billower bike. Finally, Smoker content is here. It looks like Smoker is on his way to meet with the members of Sword at the General Hospital. And he's cool enough to do so with shades, 2 cigars, and his arms crossed. Smoker joining Sword would be amazing and would be just what they need after the major loss of Garp, whose retrieval will more than likely be a major point of emphasis for them. Back to the broadcast, Dr. Vegapunk was aware of how vague he was being, but couldn't really add anything else that was an undeniable fact. Any more than this would just be speculation. But like this one guy in the crowd, speculation or not, I'm sure we would all love to know more. After that, it's back to Egghead Island. Nami was the first to notice that the barrier was going down. This was thanks to Stussy following Edison's order to do so. The Straw Hats also heard a pretty unsettling sound. Chopper realized that the clouds weren't stretching anymore, while Usopp assured him that they wouldn't need any more than they already have. They'd at least be able to hit the sea with this much. But according to Lilith, they still had the issue of the Marine fleet in their way. Thankfully, Brook was done preparing their cola barrels for the Coupe de Burst. Nami was happy to hear it, but was worried about Jinbei and Zoro still not being with them. But over Communicator, the Fishman insisted that they were close. Meanwhile, Zoro was totally locked in. And that's because the two of them were currently chasing after the massive centaur form of Nujuro. Nami told them to focus on making it to the ship, but Jinbei clarified that this wasn't a detour at all. The monster they were chasing was headed to the Thousand Sunny, and the first son of the sea believed that there was something special about the monster's presence. Nujuro began to unsheath his chilled blade over the ship. Several eyes leapt from their sockets as Lilith shouted that they were dealing with yet another elder. Nujuro grimaced as they shouted. In response, Jinbei lifted Zoro and flung him with a new fishman jujutsu move. Zoro followed this up with a new move of his own, Tsukavati's Bliss, a strike that the elder was not able to ignore. Tsukavati is a pure celestial realm of rebirth in Buddhist tradition. This was done with his two-sword style and caused haki to ripple from the impact. Although Zoro wasn't making use of his premier fighting style and just finished fighting Rob Lucci, the two swordsmen gritted their teeth in this battle for supremacy and appeared to be evenly matched. In the midst of this, Zoro noticed that the sword he was up against was one of the Kitetsu cursed blades. So we now have proper confirmation that Nujuro's sword is in fact the supreme grade blade, Shodai Kitetsu. The impact launched both fighters in opposite directions with incredible force. Jinbei caught his friend while the elder crashed into the surrounding clouds. Nami called out to Zoro, but old Mosshead insisted that they launch the ship immediately. There was no mistaking the enemy's strength and no time to waste. They jump on afterwards. On the northeast coast, Bonnie was upset that Luffy wasn't with them yet. And it's interesting that she still calls him Straw Hat and not Nika. She really wanted the guy to hurry up since they won't be able to last for much longer. Vice Admiral Hound insisted that his forces destroy the giant's old relic of a ship. That despite its legendary appearance, at the end of the day, it's still just a single ship. Nearby, Sanji wasn't able to get a signal through on account of all the mayhem and resorted to shouting his captain's name, which Luffy happily responded to from beyond the flames, telling them all to prepare to set sail. Oimo and Kashi were told to do the same by their captains. The giant crew swiftly followed orders and prepared to leave against the Marine's desires. Arrows were shot, pistols were fired. Vice Admiral Urban tried to convince his men that they were up against old geezers from 100 years ago. But the reality of the situation was very different. Fighting this crew of giant pirates looks like something straight out of a horror story. The Marines were being forced to retreat, but Vice Admiral Bluegrass wasn't willing to give up so easily. She reminded the others that they're supposed to be the paragons of justice. Instead of being just another face in the crowd, she urged them to rise to the occasion and make names for themselves. She then made one of the mechanized sea beasts shoot at the ship. Kashi was shocked to see that the old lady put a hole in their hull. Then Vice Admiral Dahl pieced them up with a rock and roll blaster, an armament hockey powered barrage of fists. Sadly, this made Kashi fall overboard. Their Vice Admiral's zeal caused squeals and reignited the passion of the Navy. Giants or not, they would stop these pirates at any cost. As they approached, Luffy looked back and wondered where the giant board that was chasing them went. It looks like War Curry teleported to his fellow elders after York's message. Dory was relieved to hear that since it meant that all they need to do now was focus on boarding the ship. Brogy agreed and was ready to go back home. Despite their tremendous stamina pools, even the giants are getting tired at this point. All that fire must be terrible for breathability. But Luffy still wondered where the piggy ran off to, which we would immediately discover as 4 of the 5 elders approached the Iron Giant. Dr. Vegapunk had one final message to convey with his broadcast, one intended for those who are currently all over the world. At the same time, Mars was in disbelief at what he saw while telepathically communicating with the other Gorosei. War Curry confirmed his colleague's suspicion that this was in fact the very same Iron Giant that plagued the Holy Land 200 years ago. There was no doubt about it. Dr. Vegapunk then began speaking to those with the letter D in their name. This bit really set Top Man off as he cursed the doctor and raged towards the source of the broadcast. Monkey D. Dragon's expression hardened as he silently listened. Sabo thought of his brothers Ace and Luffy, and Sabo already has something he needs to tell Luffy on behalf of King Cobra about the very same thing. Kobe thought about Luffy and Garp. Blackbeard's interest peaked, and Beppo considered his Captain Law. Dr. Vegapunk then began to say that among them, there is. Boom! An oversized flaming pork chop slammed into the construct and sent it flying. And there we have it, the interruption that we have all been dreading has finally arrived. War Curry believed that Vegapunk had already said more than enough. The distant collapse of the Iron Giant has further endangered the Marine blockade. Dr. Vegapunk's broadcast has been cut. The last thing we hear is Mo, which is also the title of the chapter. Vivi wondered what the doctor was about to say, while Morgans repeated the mention of the D initial. And Wapo probably wasn't able to hear anything about it during the reverie due to the loud roar that happened at the time. People all over the world wondered if the signal had been jammed. The five elders managed to avoid things becoming that much worse for them. Although they let a lot slip on Egghead, it's undeniable that every member of this five-man squad used their minutes effectively and made some major plays to secure a spirited comeback. While elsewhere, Vegapunk York was catching her breath, happy that the revelations were finally over. She's lucky. I really like her design. Right now, I have no idea what Dr. Vegapunk was planning on saying, so I would love to hear any big brain ideas you guys might have. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.